Thanks for the introduction. My name is Jesse Damiani, Deputy Director of Emerging Technology at Southern New Hampshire University. But I also curate and produce immersive and interactive exhibitions and installations. And one thing that I'm super excited for looking into the coming decade is not only how immersive art and new digital art forms are going to flourish, but how that's going to impact culture at large. And so this talk today is looking at how immersive art will shape the 2020s. To do that, I want to take a look back just to kind of set the scene for any folks who don't necessarily already have this knowledge top of mind. So in the last decade, thanks to sort of the introduction of Google Glass and the Oculus Rift into the consumer, sort of the public discourse, even though many people either weren't able to get those headsets or weren't interested in it, it caused the general literacy around VR and AR to balloon. And so with that, we also saw the development of new creation tools. So things like Tilt Brush, Medium, Quill, Masterpiece VR, other things that aren't listed like Gravity Sketch and Anim VR. These were tools that allowed all types of new artists and creators to enter into immersive art in ways that prior to that had only really been the domains of artists who are already working in digital formats. So we saw this kind of influx of painters, sculptors, illustrators, and even folks from other kind of realms of the digital world, like interaction designers and character artists, make their way to creating in and for immersive formats. And so we can really look back and look at those early years of the past decade as kind of the flashpoint for when all of this started to change. To the extent that looking into the 2020s, it now feels much more sort of commonplace, not in a pejorative way, but it feels much more commonplace insofar as it's not surprising to see a given artist have a practice or make most of their practice immersive. Alongside that, the other really important aspect of the kind of industry development was a space for artists to display their work. And while there had been examples of immersive art existing in film festivals, even dating back to Jackie Mori's work in the early 90s, it wasn't until Hunger in Los Angeles debuted in 2012 at Sundance New Frontier that we really started to see film festivals around the world start to incorporate immersive art into their frameworks. And alongside that, festivals like MUTEC and Sonar Plus D and other cultural institutions like Phi Center, you'll see pictured here. This was their build out for Spheres in late 2018, which ultimately made its way to Rockefeller Center, started to really define how this work could enter into public discourse. So many folks weren't able to actually own a certain headset, but they were able to go to these different public venues, be it a film festival, an industry event, or an arts institution, and engage with this work. So what you have is this influx of new creators and the creation and sort of expansion of new venues for this to sort of come to fruition. And it was during this space and in this space that I sort of found my way to the immersive arts, because a gallery called Space Gallery in Los Angeles invited me to curate and produce a VR AR exhibition there, which really situated me in a lot of the sort of best practices learned the hard way for how to bring this art into the public. So now we're at a point where the literacy of immersive art has increased considerably and has also begun to define the artistic experiences that audiences crave. We can see in the considerable investment in growth in locations and companies like Meow Wolf, but also things built by Moment Factory and other types of experiential integrations, advertising campaigns. There's a general sense that this experience economy is something that is meeting audiences where they are. And immersive art fits into that. Immersive art doesn't obviously take up all of that because not everything that's experiential is necessarily art. But it does create a framework in which we know that audiences are wanting deeply immersive experiences that take them, you know, completely out of whatever their sort of normative environment might be. We're also going to see, and we already begun to see, new hardware and software improvements that will change who can participate. And this is key because it's not just who can participate as consumers, but also as creators. So the fact that you have a device like Oculus Quest, which is at a price point that more folks can afford, means that you have a lot more people who can then create art in Tilt Brush, a lot more folks who can engage with sort of new pieces of immersive art in quill theater. And then on the AR side, some of the work that Apple is doing, you'll see depicted in this GIF here from Halide, with the integration of LiDAR, we now we're entering a mode where AR can actually have meaningful real-time occlusion, and we can start to really play with what filtering and augmenting environments looks like. I think one thing I find really interesting about this depiction here is you can see that the kitchen has been filtered and is being filtered in real time, but there are spaces that aren't. And it makes me wonder about the different types of simultaneous filtering or not that we might have in a given environment and how an artist might play with that. So immersive art will dovetail with other emerging practices and technologies to shape the culture of the 2020s, because the technology environment will be conducive to it. One thing to really make clear is, in general, artists are often the first to imagine, discover, and deeply analyze the unique capabilities of new tools and technologies. And this applies to artists in any form across any moment. But now we're talking about artists who are dealing with the technologies that will weave more tightly into the fabric of daily life. So these folks are going in and discovering what those possible implications of the technologies are by approaching them creatively and artistically. And I really can't underscore how significant that is at a time when our technologies are increasingly powerful. So I'm really excited about how these artists are going to enter into that conversation and in many ways define that conversation. What follows here are the kind of important signals that I see for that future. The first and probably easiest point of entry that I think the 2020s will facilitate are AR for activism and site-specifics, I say here, but so site-specific AR work. So building off sort of the premise of Pokemon Go, but applying it from an artistic standpoint. The two pieces pictured here, I think, do a great job kind of expressing the value and the power of this type of work. So on the left, we have a piece from Kristen Myers called Cyclone. This is from an exhibition called Battlegrounds, which was spearheaded by Nancy Baker Cahill and deployed through the Fourth Wall AR app, in which 30 different pieces of art were geolocated around New Orleans in sites of conflict. And by putting these pieces in contested sites, it actually put the art into conversation with places that activate the very discussion, the very sort of ground that they emerge from. This is something that exists, you know, IRL in public art formats, but public art formats require extensive builds. There's often, you know, a detriment to the environment around it, whether through a carbon footprint or sort of breaking down of those environments. AR allows folks to show up and there's nothing physically there, but they can engage with art that's actually deepening the art and the environment with basically zero environmental impact. Another example that I think really kind of depicts what can be done with AR art and what I believe will be done to a great degree in the 2020s would be Marjan Moghadam's Glitch Goddess interventions. And she would bring this piece, this Glitch Goddess, which the Glitch Goddess, what it does is it shuffles through different expressions of femininity throughout time, ranging from sort of expected ideas of ideal femininity to abstracted, glitched out shapes that are sort of fully cyborg and fully digital. And she would bring this piece to different shows at big art fairs that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see a digital art. But in so doing, she invokes a conversation between the art that's being displayed. In one case, she brought it to a show that was a history of the nude, in which there was a massive overrepresentation of male artists and a massive overrepresentation of nude female subjects. So she brought this piece there as a way to enter into conversation with what the premise, what the conceit of that show was. So again, I think these are just two examples from late in the last decade to really give an indication of how artists might start playing with this in the 2020s. And we can start to imagine the ways that it can be used in realms that transcend just the art world, that give activists and motivated enthusiasts the ability to capture a digital reality that that not everybody is necessarily able to see in the IRL real world. Obviously, another really important piece of this puzzle are shared and social experiences. We've seen a huge rise in interest around immersive theater, and obviously all of this right now is inflected by COVID. And there's so many questions around how COVID will impact, in-person experiences. I think it's safe to say that at some point in the 2020s, we'll be allowed to be in public with each other again, even if the relative density of those groups is more moderated. So two examples here that I think really depict sort of the cutting edge of what we can do with social immersive experiences are Scarecrow, which debuted at this year's Sundance, and the Horrifically Real Virtuality from DV Group, where you can see in both, you're getting a little bit of a sort of a side-by-side or a one-to-one of who the actor is and how the actor is being translated into the space. And I think this piece with DV Group, you can see actually that all of the participants are embodied as avatars around sort of a main central character. So there's this multivalent aspect of who the digital participants are and how it feels in the real world. I think one of the most powerful early experiences for me in this realm was an experience called Chained, in which you are taking part in sort of like a haunted Christmas experience. And in it, the first time the ghost touches your shoulders, you have a completely different experience of being in the virtual space. And many other people report this with other experiences like Jack and Alice. And so to me, I think this is something that opens up a lot of possibility because of the different ways we can embody as avatars and bring an artistic touch into avatar embodiment. And not only with actors who are performing a given character, but also with how we embody the different participants and what those different avatar embodiments might do to change how they think they're representing in space. And what happens if you give them a task or give them a charge, give them an inciting incident in that context. That mixture of a gamified mechanic and an artistic experience has already proven itself to be very rich, very robust, and sort of beloved. And I think as technologies make it easier to do this type of thing, we're going to see more and more of it, and probably even start to see the ways in which it bleeds into contexts that aren't even just immersive art contexts. Carrying up on the sort of shared social, going from the highest touch side to the lowest touch side, you've got filters. And I think it's a mistake to underestimate how powerful filters are in terms of allowing folks to represent themselves exactly as they want or in surprising and unexpected ways. And more importantly, what we've seen in sort of the second half of the last decade was the activation of a filter creator community and artists who are making filters. So now they're taking their practice and they're translating it to, how do I want to bring whatever sort of my message, whatever the ideas that I want to share are, how do I bring that into a context where folks can do whatever they want with it and engage it in any environment of their choosing? And I think we're already seeing an incredible amount of innovation on that front. And I think because of its sort of ubiquity in social apps, it's one of the sort of most important spear points, let's say, of this shared and social kind of angle that immersive arts will impact. Moving again, looking at sort of more high touch stuff, but that I think will become much more accessible is 3D capture technologies like volumetric, photogrammetry, and the holograms that you can produce with that. So on the left here, you see algae from Marpy, which is displayed on the looking glass, which is a holographic display. So it's hard maybe to even see on this GIF, but when you're actually present with this piece, that art looks three-dimensional, and with leap motion, you're actually interacting with it, and you almost get that sense of phantom touch. And of course, Looking Glass has like their sort of large scale display now, and I think that's only going to continue. They're doing some really incredible work in the space, and the ways that artists bring their work into holographic and interactive formats will become easier and easier, and you'll see more and more folks doing it. On the right, we have Asad Malik, who's directing Poppy and Titanic Sinclair in producing a hologram of Poppy. Wanrik, Asad's studio, has launched Jadu, which is a social app, not social VR, not social AR, but it's a social app that anyone can download and bring 15-second holograms into their own videos. And they're planning to release new artists, over time. And this type of integration allows artists who don't have any sort of investment or even interest in emerging technologies to participate in that sphere in a way that allows them to engage with their fans in totally new ways. We've already seen sort of a big swell of people bringing these holograms into their spaces. And I think there's like a huge potential waiting to be tapped with, again, these devices that are ubiquitous, that most people have a device that's powerful enough to run this type of thing. So bringing together artists from both within and out of emerging technologies is something that will dramatically increase the literacy around immersive arts, and by extension, dramatically impact how sort of culture writ large develops. So the final two pieces that I want to get to are, the presence of interactive experiences and projection mapping in large scale spaces. Again, when we are able to go out in public again, and finally, the integration of wearable devices, the integration of large data sets, and of course, the much touted buzzword AI. What happens when we can work in tandem, and artists can work in tandem with robots or with their data, or with data around any number of topics that they can sort of organize and understand, and integrate that into immersive formats, any of the immersive formats that I've listed prior. So with that, thank you for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Hi, Jesse. Great talk.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well. I'm doing great. I really loved what you said. My favorite line was, artists are often the first to imagine, discover, and deeply analyze the unique capabilities of new tools and technologies. That's so true. How do you think that happens with this new technology, with virtual reality, augmented reality, XR?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I started to hit on earlier on the talk is that we now have creative tools that are accessible and becoming increasingly accessible. So they're meeting folks often in places where they're consuming first. So they're seeing that, something like rewinding, seeing something that looks like Pokemon Go, but is an art platform, like Nancy's Fourth Wall app. You go experience some AR art in the wild and you're like, wait, I want to do that. And the means to produce that is getting easier and easier.
Absolutely. Mez Breeze has a question for you. Congratulations on your recent win. I'd love to know his perspective on virtual beings when combined with AI, like with Three Laterals acquisition by Epic, Magic Leap's Mika, or VR Story Studios Fables relaunch with digital human AI VR agents as their focus.
It's a fantastic question, and it's one of those nice questions where, the truest answer anybody can give is who knows. What I think is really promising is probably a long way away, is actually having sort of context-aware sort of co-creators and collaborators, as it relates to art at least, in the form of a virtual being powered by artificial intelligence. I think we're far from that. So for now, I think the ways that those avatars can sort of populate space and be maybe not fully intelligent yet, but they can be positioned the way an actor in an immersive theater piece might be, who's not one of the lead actors, but is there to play a particular role and to be really, really good and to feel real. That I think is the next thing we'll see from virtual beings. That feels really exciting to me. Though, of course, a lot of the demos that you'll see, obviously the quantum capture work, and there's a lot of convergences between the fully digital aspect of the virtual being and the sort of human input that causes those things to be better and better.
Okay. Barry Cole, he said, thanks. Can you talk more about interactive projection mapping?
Sure. I don't know exactly. I mean, there's a lot to say. I curated a show that had it was one of the only holodome. It's actually the only exhibition of holodome artwork that's happened. Other things have been on holodomes, and those are smaller scale interactive domes. So basically, you have Vive controllers, and you can interact with the art in there. And Float did some amazing work to kind of cultivate a number of different pieces from a number of different artists working across different media, and being able to be in an experience that is shared, because you're fundamentally not in a headset, so you haven't been mediated in any way, even if it's dark and whatever else. And being able to interact with the art actually sort of invests you in an interesting way. And then when you add into the fact that you're sharing that with the people around you, as a direct lived experience, I think is quite powerful. And so the other stuff that I'm really excited that's sort of coming down the pike is like there's an artist in the Netherlands named Roelof Nol. Everybody should follow him, who's doing some incredible work blending different types of projection that interact with each other, all the way out to AR, where you might have a record on a turntable spinning, and as it turns, it's got music visualizations coming off of it that are interacting with the TV screen, that are interacting with a projection on the wall, and creating a full sort of visualized environment. So there's a full gamut of different types of artistic experiences that are coming, ranging from the huge, massive scale stuff, all the way down to, I think we're going to start seeing it more in our homes.
Absolutely. Well, if you shared your Twitter handle, if somebody wants to ask more questions, and there are some more questions, but we are running out of time, where could we send them to? Just your Twitter? Is that the best place to go?
Yeah, DMs are open on Twitter. My email on the VR Scout side is jesse@vrscout.com.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nova.